Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another video. So this is going to be the Penguin deck profile that I actually just took to the remote Duel YCS this past weekend. If I sound a bit tired first and foremost, I do apologize. It's because I am tired. It's about 1 a.m. as I'm recording this. Swiss ended not too long ago, so yeah, after 12 long hours and 8 grueling rounds of Swiss, we ended with a record of 3-4-1, which of course is not a great record by any stretch, but exceeding kind of my own expectations for how this deck would perform. So yeah, this deck honestly is pretty fun to play. I did play against a fair amount of meta decks. If you want to kind of see the specific matchups that I played, I'll be posting kind of screenshots from my Twitter, which by the way, go ahead and follow me if you haven't already. But I was live tweeting and updating as the tournament progressed over on Twitter. So if you want kind of like the concise summaries of how each of those individual rounds went, they'll be on screen for you guys right now for you guys to look at. But yeah, this deck was pretty cool because I really did try and break it as much as possible to really contend with the meta decks. And of course, it still has limitations. Obviously, it's not as grindy. It's not as resource efficient. It doesn't have like the required extenders needed to really like play past disruptions a lot of the time. But I really do think that this is like one of the best ways I could come up with for kind of this specific event in particular. So I guess I want to throw out a couple of caveats here before we start. First off, because I tried to make it as competitively minded as possible, it's not really going to be what a lot of people would consider like a pure Penguin deck. And by that I mean, we're going to supplement the Penguin engine, which is still the central focus, but we're going to just accompany it with a lot of really powerful cards in the metagame right now. And so you'll kind of see what I mean as we get through here. But the second thing is going to be because of that, unfortunately, this is also not going to be a budget build. I do apologize for that. But I really did, again, just try and play the deck as optimally as possible. And so I do want to shout out my friend Nick, by the way, who hooked me up and let me borrow a lot of his cards that I was missing. Really, really helped me out at the last minute because I actually drove in from school back home just yesterday even. And now I'm here playing the YCS a day later. So really couldn't do this without you, man. If you're watching this, appreciate it. But yeah, so I guess first things first is what does this deck actually do? So a lot of people are going to like focus on like Penguin Brave, turboing it, like setting a Penguin Soldier and just kind of sitting on it and controlling the game. What I found is that if you rely on that, you really just don't have the follow-up to actually, keep pushing a threat and like, mounting, offensive pressure turn after turn, because a lot of the decks right now, even if their boards get broken, which is very, very likely because of this, the amount of resiliency engines have, or just the defensive cards that are non-engine, like you have to recover on the following turn. And a lot of the Penguin builds either just like they're just completely designed, to like set and pass in like a more casual environment, which is totally fine. Or if like they just try and turbo into the synchro, they don't really have like a backup plan. Like what if your Brave gets like Chalice, for instance, or like your opponent just can play past the disruptions. It's pretty difficult. So what I decided to do is use the Penguins as a means of, threatening something pretty important that your opponent is incentivized to stop. So it could be Brave as like, kind of the hand trap magnet, I suppose, or the disruption magnet, or cards like Christian Hakafibrax. You have a lot of ways to put threats on board, just via Squire and Emperor, just kind of summoning free bodies. And then failing that, you want to back up into, of course, everyone's favorite Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. And there is a synergy with Enforcer with the Penguin engine, which we'll kind of get into. But that's kind of just the way you can simplify games in this deck in particular. And because this deck is so monster dense, you can really utilize the Celestial Dasher follow-up to really just get value off of those effects, and then just swarm the field for additional follow-up. So that's the main premise of the deck. And with that being said, we're already 4 minutes in. So let's just go and kind of talk about things. I do want to still be in depth, but again, I am relatively tired. So I apologize if I kind of am missing some obvious things, or if some things maybe aren't the most concise here. But carrying on, we're going to go ahead and start with the main deck. So with the Penguin engine, we're going to begin with 3 copies of Royal Penguin's Gardner. So this card on activation allows you to search for a Penguin card that is not another copy of itself. And then once it returns on the field, you can reduce the level of a Penguin monster either in your hand or on the field by 1, and then you discard a card. So this card obviously is a consistency tool. Generally, a lot of people think about searching Emperor with this card, which is pretty valid. It's the only real card in the Penguin engine itself that works just completely independently from anything. You only need 1 random blank, whereas most of the other cards require other enablers to make them more effective. But Guardian is really, really good, of course, for getting Emperor and normal summoning it as a level 4 body, but a lot of the times I actually didn't use it to search for that card. Instead, I would search for Penguin Squire, which is the best extender in this deck. So this card, first off, has a restriction where you cannot synchro summon with it as material unless that monster would be a water monster. And then it has an effect in the hand where if a monster is set to your field, you can special summon it from your hand and then it reduces its level by 1 or 2. And then following that has an ignition effect where you can target a face down defense position monster you control and then flip it face up with its effects negated if it's not a penguin. So essentially what this card does is it allows you to combo with, of course, just the other penguins in your deck. But really what I tried to find was cards that would actually work, in tandem with this card or by themselves that wouldn't be hindered by the fact that their effects got negated. And you'll see that what I mean by this pretty soon here. But yeah, this card works with the fair majority of the deck. It's the one you always want to be seeing. And effectively with Gardner, you can get access to 6 copies of it. And because this card is so good with the other normal summons of the deck, this was actually the card I'd be searching a lot of the time off of Garden if I had like other plays to work with, not the Emperor. Emperor would only be the search if it was A, mid to late game, if I like drew it off Celestial, which was also kind of the goal, or B, if I literally didn't have any other play and I had to go for Emperor, which was kind of just not the ideal case scenario. But this card is just a card that is live a lot of the time. It does tend to lose pretty hard to just negation type cards in general, which is unfortunate. But it's a card that allows you to flex into the Penguin Brave or Christian Hcabe. So it's very, very versatile as a tool. So it's I think the best penguin in the deck by a pretty significant margin. Then we have the 2 of penguins. So we have 2 copies of no penguins. So this card is a recurable body in the graveyard. Whenever a penguin monster's effect is activated, it just summons itself right back. And then when on the field, it turns all your bouncing penguin effects into banishing effects instead. So basically, the classic combo is this plus either Penguin Soldier or the Glacial Beast Polar Penguin. And then you can really just use these monsters to actually swarm the field as well as clear your opponent's bodies. This card is pretty interesting. So Glacial Beast Polar Penguin allows you to, if it's a special summon, you can target an opponent's monster they control and then bounce back to the hand. Or if it's on the field destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target any card that they control and return it to the hand. You can unfortunately only use one of those effects per turn and only once that turn. But this is a synergy with Enforcer. You can actually pop this with Enforcer and get that effect. So you can pop a card with the Enforcer and then bounce another card with the Polar Penguin. And if you have no Penguin engraved, which oftentimes you do, especially if you open Emperor, you can turn that into a banish instead. So like these are kind of like the targets. The no Penguin and the Polar Penguin are your Emperor targets a lot of the time. So that is pretty ideal. They help you make Brave. They're pretty good. This one's summonable off of Hcabe, so it can help you make Hcabe itself. So pretty solid stuff. And it's also 800 attack, which helps you make Salamangreat Amirage, which is relevant for the deck too. Next up are the one-ofs. So we have the one of Great Emperor Penguin. This is really not a card you want to be drawing all the time, unless if you're focusing your build around it. If you are, you can take it in that direction for sure. I was testing kind of a build that was like what I called 5-axis, where I played like Foolish Burial Goods and like the new Ice Barrier Trap from Brothers of Legend and like the Ice Jade cards to really just turbo this thing out. And that worked pretty decently, but a lot of those cards or combos are like 2 to 3 cards. When I try to keep the combos in this deck to 1 to 2 cards, which afforded more room in the deck for more defensives like hand traps and stuff. Whereas that build didn't really have as much space for those. But yeah, this card obviously is the card that allows you to treat itself to special summon up to 2 penguins from your deck besides itself. I did not play anything to like really super abuse this multiple times per turn. Really, I just saw this as kind of a bomb card where you just want to, get the most mileage out of it when the opportunity presents itself, and then hopefully by then you've won the game, or you can at least stabilize to the point where you can like stick a DPE, or you can go into Hcabe into access code, stuff like that. So yeah, this card is great. I didn't abuse the fact that it's not once per turn, but I don't think it's necessary as long as you kind of build with that in mind. So hence no Puny Penguin in this deck. Even though I do love that card, Puny Penguin was a bit too slow in this really high-powered format right now. Like you think of decks like Tri-Brigade Loyalist, and you think of Sword Soul, you think of Phantom Knight, and Invoked Dogmatica. Like those are all the decks that I was literally trying to build with penguins, right? So like obviously you have to speed up the deck to the best capability that you can, and I think really just trying to use this again as kind of like a late game finisher is sort of the way to go. And then we have the 1 copy of Penguin Soldier. I actually wasn't playing this initially for a while, but what I found was that in a lot of the end boards you do still want this off the Brave, because you can end with Brave in tandem with other disruptions, which is totally fine. Like if you have Brave plus like Enforcer plus Savage, that's pretty good, or like Brave plus Savage plus Hand Traps is pretty good. So yeah, I think that like this is like one of the best countermeasures for going first. And it's actually decent at breaking boards going second. Something I kind of want to try moving forward if I were to revisit this deck would be to actually just play a go second list, play a ton of hand traps, like more than I'm playing in this list, to really just weaken boards, and then try and open this plus Squire, maybe play like Prosperity and stuff, and then really just try and break boards that way. Because I found that like there were times where I went second with these two after I hand trapped my opponent, and it was actually really effective. So maybe that's something that is worth experimenting with in the future, but this was primarily just a target off of Brave. Nothing too much to say about it. If you draw it, it's actually not a big deal because a lot of people do run two of this card just to prevent Brave from being a dead boss monster essentially, because like typically if this is the only target, then you're kind of out of luck, so you have to play multiples. But in this deck, you can actually summon Polar Penguin in face down defense, no problem, and then just summon Enforcer, and then you can Enforcer pop this still while it's face down. So having that flexibility makes it so you can cut down on the bricks, which is pretty valuable, especially because, again, I am playing Enforcer anyways, but I think those bricks are a lot more justifiable. So that's it for the Penguin engine, actually, so we'll get these out of the way right here. Whoops. Next up, we'll go for some of the other starters. So I think Gardner is like one of the starters, and then these are the other 9 starters. So first off, we have 3 copies of Sangan. Now this is really interesting. So Sangan is a 1-card Hcabe, 1-card Verite Anaconda, just like really powerful by itself. But also with the Penguin Squire, you can really get a lot of mileage out of it, because this is one of the monsters that I was mentioning before, where it doesn't matter if it's negated by the Penguin Squire, because you're just going to link it off and get the graveyard effect regardless. So this card is great working by itself or in tandem with the Penguin engine, which is phenomenal. So this card, obviously is going to search you for one of your engine requirements, which is, I'll just show it right here. It's going to be Crusadia Arborea, because we were playing Almirage. So that little package allows you to really just have a wide variety of flexible plays, which is really good. It's also really relevant because it is 600 defense, and we are playing Hcabe Pitch in this deck. So Hcabe Pitch allows you to search for Penguin Squire as well as this card, so you can have follow-up in whatever form you feel is most needed at the time if you do get to combo, which is very good. It's also level 3, which combos with stuff like Polar Penguin to get into Brave mid to late game. So just a lot of really cool applications with this card, and I think that it is pretty solid. And if you already have everything you need, you can just search a hand trap off of this. So I think this has a lot of applications and is very solid. Next up is going to be 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva. So this card is a bit weaker than Sangan for sure. It's a lot more vulnerable in that, like, if you go for, like, you could say like sit Sangan and then activate Squire to summon itself, and that Squire gets impermed. Well, you still have like Sangan to like search for a follow-up, maybe even just another Sangan for next turn, which is fine. If your Diva to get stopped, it's a little bit worse because you can't really combo with Squire until later in the combo. Diva plus Squire still is a really strong combo, and also if you want a combo video, like the video, I guess, and let me know. I will do a combo video if it gets 100 likes. Let's just shoot for that. But yeah, anyways, Diva obviously gets into Hcabe Verite by itself, similar to Sangan. But again, with Squire, you can't combo with this because going to Hcabe allows you to summon Brave without really having to deviate from the combo very much. And then if you have Squire, you can trigger it on the resolution of Brave, and then just kind of keep going from there, which is pretty solid. So yeah, this card is pretty good. I considered playing Despot 3 because I am playing Despot 1 already, but I didn't want to play a second copy of Despot 1 to kind of just account for the fact that I was trying to summon Despot 1 off the Hcabe, so we need the second, and actually didn't contribute to a better combo from what I found, just having the extra tuner there. So I decided not to play it, and Diva worked fine. It wasn't the greatest, but I think for its slot, it was good. It's definitely the weakest of the 12 starters. And then the last starter is, of course, everyone's favorite Fusion Destiny. This card is obviously broken by itself with Enforcer, but like I mentioned, the synergy is just that you pop your Polar Penguin and then get more mileage out of it. But this is like kind of your fallback plan if your Penguins really aren't able to get the job done, which oftentimes, unfortunately, they can't, but they really do excel actually at trying to just break boards because your opponent has to negate a lot of these cards. So like this is kind of just the fallback plan. And then you can control the game, and then Celestial draw into more Penguins. Like drawing Gardner off of Celestial is really, really good because you have the second card to just pitch if you want to go for an Emperor play with the Gardner on field modulation effect. So like that comes up quite a bit. And then so that is it for these cards. And next up is going to be sort of the engine requirements. So in order of the ones that are best to worst to draw, we have Crusadia Arborea, which is actually fine to draw in a lot of cases because of the fact that it just summons itself for free just to link a zone that a link monster points to on your field. So if you draw this with Sangan, like you can search a hand trap, like I mentioned, so that's pretty good. Oftentimes it is like the body that you kind of want to have in your hand if like you get stopped on like Hcabe, for instance. So maybe this is a card that you can consider bumping up, just like having extenders that you can just summon and keep playing. I did draw it quite a lot, but I also didn't mind it, so that's maybe a consideration. Despot 1, this card obviously is not a card you want to draw, but you can still summon it off of Hcabe Fibrex. You'll notice that a lot of the garnets, or not the garnets, sorry, a lot of the bricks that I have in my deck are not garnets, but they're Takatomborgs instead, meaning that if you draw them, you're not completely like hindered from your combo. And that's a big reason I didn't play the Gen X package. I want to kind of touch on that here. So a lot of people are playing Gen X Undyne with Controller and Rosenix because Gen X Undyne lets you get into Hcabe Fibrex plus Penguin Brave by itself. The problem with that is that you're playing 2 Garnets for 3 starters, and if you draw either of them, you can't combo. Drawing Rosenix isn't as bad because like you still have targets to send. Like No Penguin's a pretty good one, but you can't go into like the Link Spider into summon Controller from hand, into Hcabe Fibrex, into summon Polar Penguin, into Brave, which most people are trying to do with this deck. So it doesn't make sense to me that like you're trying to play cards that you already need to stay in deck, because you need certain cards to stay in deck as is, like with the Penguin Brave I was mentioning earlier, like with Penguin Soldier and stuff, especially if you're not playing the Enforcer to be able to kind of mitigate that. But with this, you're playing stuff like, Despot 1, which you don't want to draw, Celestial, you don't want to draw, Dasher, you don't want to draw. But if you do draw these cards, they are not completely dead. You can still use Hcabe Fibrex, summon this from hand. You can still Fusion Destiny, fuse these from hand. And that I think is really important in a deck where you need as many of your cards to be live as possible, because the problem is that like when you draw a controller, it's not just a controller that's dead. It's like you draw the controller with the Undyne and then both of them are dead. It's like really, really awful. Whereas like if you draw Fusion Destiny plus Dasher, well, it's like, yeah, it sucks that you have Dasher, but at least you still have Fusion Destiny to keep comboing, or at least to as much of a combo as it is, I guess. Not really as much of a combo as just activating Fusion Destiny and sticking Enforcer. But I digress. Like these cards obviously are not phenomenal to draw, with the exception of Arborea, which is decent if your hand's already good. But the important thing is, again, they are Takatomborgs, they are not Garnets. So I really want to like emphasize the fact that like that makes a big difference in a deck like this, where again, you still don't have a lot of like, you have a lot of cards that just aren't the greatest to draw. Like you don't really want to be drawing No Penguin unless if it's with Squire already. You don't want to be drawing like Polar Penguin all the time unless you're going second maybe. So it's like, it's really like hit or miss with a lot of the Penguin engine. So you do have to make sure that like if you are playing engine requirements to play a really powerful engine, which is totally understandable in this type of deck. Like you want cards that are as powerful as like Gen X Undyne, as powerful as Fusion Destiny, but you want to make sure that like the deck building cost doesn't like severely hinder your ability to play in a deck that is already as tricky as it is. So I hope that makes sense. Something I wish I played in tandem with this is potentially, not definitively, but maybe Creation Resonator, because I realized actually just like late yesterday, after deck lists were already due like for submission, so I couldn't change my deck list, was like if you go just for the Auroradon combo, you can actually go for both Savage and Brave if you play the Creation Resonator, which is something I just didn't think of doing at all. But yeah, that's something that I probably would try and find space for. Another thing that I somehow forgot to mention with these, I didn't play Coltwing either. You'll notice that's another example of a card that is a Garnet and not a Takatomborg, because I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. All right, so not much else to explain here with these. So the rest of the deck is literally just defensives. So we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom. This card is pretty low impact, of course, but like it hits a lot of things, and I figured that if I started to lose more and more, this card would get better and better, because this card is a lot better against the rogue decks than it is against the meta decks usually. We have Nibiru, which put in work. This card was phenomenal. I wish I drew it more. We have the Imperm, which was pretty good for going second. It was decent into playing against DPE if they just hard draw Fusion Destiny. It's like a pretty good insurance plan. And then the last hand trap is the 10th one, and that's the 1 copy of Effect Veiler. It's because I am playing Selene in the extra deck. So I want Hcabe Fibrex into Veiler into Selene Access Code as an option. I actually drew this card a fair bit, which was good as a hand trap, but sometimes it also kind of cut off that Hcabe Fibrex into Selene line. So maybe I would have played more of it. I was playing more of it initially, but I cut it for other cards. 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. This card was hit or miss. More so due to the fact that I just didn't draw it a lot of the time when they did hand trap me, and a lot of times when they didn't hand trap me, I had this kind of dead in my hand. So that is just variance. That's kind of the nature of this card. But when it did resolve, it did help me win some games, so I can't complain too much. There was a game where I took an opponent's monster to help make Hcabe Fibrex, which was pretty good. Like after my Squire got negated, I just took a monster and made Hcabe Fibrex with it. So that's pretty nice. What else about this? I also like took an opponent's monster and OTK'd with it. I looked at my opponent's hand and like sniped a hand trap. I rarely use the draw effect because like the thing with this is that like you're already usually using Squire to bait out a hand trap, and there is no other extender in this deck that you're trying to draw into besides Fusion Destiny. So when you're drawing cards, all you're really trying to draw is either Fusion Destiny exactly or just more hand traps. And it doesn't make a lot of sense mathematically to do so because the probability is generally around 16% from what I calculated to draw Fusion Destiny. So I'm like, that's not really worth it. I'd rather just use the other effects. And a lot of times they came up pretty handily. And the final two defenses are Call by the Grave and Imperial Order. Call by the Grave actually was not great because a lot of what this deck loses to are like Nibiru Imperm type cards, and just didn't really do it for me. So this card is definitely cuttable. Order, I just didn't draw very much, so I can't comment on this too much. And testing was really good though. So that is it for the 40 card main deck. I really tried to just make it as consistent as I could, while kind of keeping the identity of that I had kind of in mind when I set out to build this deck. All right, so for Link monsters, we're just going to move through the extra deck here. We have Almirage. This is for the Sangan play into Arborea. We have double Christian Haka Fibrax. This first one is like often hand trapped, or like you go into the Auroradon play. And the second one like helps you close out games, which is pretty good with the Selene play. Verte, obviously. We have Auroradon. This again, I didn't play Colt Wing, so like it's fine. Still because like you play the Cupid Pitch, which I'll get to shortly, and that helps you get into a lot of the plays pretty nicely. We have Selene with like the Veiler to pair into the Axis Code Talker. And then for the Synchros, we have the Cupid Pitch. So this card is really, really good because when you make it with the Despot 1 and one of the Mecha Fan Beast tokens, you often can reduce the level by 1 to make it a 3. And then with another Mecha Fan Base token, that helps you go into Penguin Brave, which is like one of the best ways you can just get into your Penguin engine without opening Penguin cards. And I think that's something this deck really appreciates because a lot of the times, like you can't actually get to Penguin Brave with just Penguin cards unless if you open, specifically like Squire or Gardner. And like again, you're not always guaranteed to draw those. So just having more ways to consistently access that is good. It can also increase itself to get to like Savage Dragon easier, which is pretty good. Again, I would probably consider playing Creation Resonator as a target, just because like in the combo where you just open Haka Fibrax, like getting to both Brave and Savage is like really, really good. So I think that's like a change I would make if I were to try and improve on this build in the future. We have double copies of Brave. Did the second one come up? I'm trying to remember. I think it did. I'm pretty sure I've made everything in this extra deck at least once, which is nice. But yeah, this either sets you your Penguin Soldier or your Glacial Beast Polar Penguin if you have Enforcer, or your Emperor Penguin if you have Squire they haven't triggered yet to start your combo, and then you can like extend from there because you can flip it up and then tribute it and then just keep going. We have one Coral Dragon. This is a board breaker if you're going second, and also Haka Fibrax tag out target, which came up a couple times. We have Savage Dragon to pair with the Cupid Pitch, and then we have Crocker Dragon. I kind of wish I played Adamantium Risen Dragon. I was considering playing it. It didn't come up super much or super often, but like there were times where it was like an option to go into, but I had other plays anyways, so it wasn't like a big deal. Crocker Dragon actually comes up in a play where if you have Emperor that you flip up with Squire, you can actually tag out the Emperor into Polar and no Penguin, and then with the third Mecha Fan Beast token, you make this to draw 2. And that helps to like dig for hand traps and then like Fusion Destiny, which I know like kind of conflicts with the tactics logic, but if you're already comboing, then drawing more cards is like really good. But like if you're getting hindered from comboing in the first place, then tactics draw doesn't help you as much. So I hope that makes that logic makes more sense. Oh, I forgot one more synchro. It's the Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Chenging. This card is makeable with Brave plus a modulated Squire down to 4, which I actually did a lot. And this card is good into decks like Phantom Knights, good like against like Eldritch, for instance, where it's just like, really big. It's kind of hard to out, and you can actually proc it yourself. Where if you have Enforcer plus your Polar Penguin, or even just like Brave plus Penguin Soldier flipped with no Penguin engraved. The no Penguin, again, causes your Penguin effects to banish instead, so you can actually trigger this pretty reliably. And failing that, you can actually go Crocker Dragon to target this and then protect it with its own effect and trigger it that way, which is pretty cool. Because you oftentimes actually end on these two together with that combo that I mentioned previously with the Croc. And the last card is everyone's favorite Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. This card is bonkers ridiculous. Like by itself, it just wins a lot of games. And it's typically because like you use the Penguin engine to force out like a hand trap or two, and then you just end on Enforcer, and that's like good enough to carry you with your own hand traps. So that is it for the extra. And finally, moving on into the side. This side was really not good. For the simple fact I didn't play against a lot of the decks that was kind of like meant to, to be helpful against. So first off, we have 3 copies of Cyframe Yugioh, and then of course we have the obligatory driver. This just was not very good. I actually didn't draw Gamma often, so I can't really comment on it. I really do like the card a lot, but it might not be that great in this kind of deck, just because again, you're playing like just more cards you don't want to draw, but it's so high impact that I think it's like really, really good just in the meta right now. So in other decks, it's probably stronger. 3 copies of Joel Lockberry. This only came in against like the Invoked Dogma matchup, I think. I'm trying to remember my matchups off the top of my head. But yeah, this didn't come in very often. Like in theory, it's like really good against like, Bird Up and stuff, but just didn't really happen. I didn't play any Bird Up. We have 2 copies of Cosmic. I wish I played 3 of this. Like, I wish I played the 3rd one either in my main deck or in my side deck somewhere. Because like I did not respect background enough, and I played 2 Altergeist, and that was like really, really tough. Like the first one I got absolutely trounced by Mystic Mine, like both games 1 and 2. The second one I did manage to beat, but yeah, like having more of this would have been like astronomically helpful. So that's like something I would probably change as well moving forward. 3 evenly matched. This card was terrible. I keep thinking every time that like I think this card is like amazing, it really just isn't. Like if your opponent just knows how to play around it, or like if you just draw it later into the game, like it's like it's just not a fantastic card in my opinion. At least not in the circumstances that I found myself in. It's good maybe if I can compare it with like Dark Ruler, for instance, but Dark Ruler conflicts with like Hcabe pitch in this deck, and I didn't really want to do that. So yeah, I just decided not to bother too much. Like, would I play this card again? Maybe, honestly, just because like back row is still pretty scary, but maybe I would just play Twin Twister instead. And then lastly, it's probably the best card in my side deck actually, with just 3 copies of Solemn Judgment for going first. This helped like solidify my board, and that is pretty much all it was there to do. And so that is it for the deck profile. Somehow this managed to still be almost 30 minutes. Oh my goodness, I need to go to bed. But yeah, wow. Still, I had a ton of fun. Like, it might not sound like it, but I had a lot of fun. Theorying this deck pretty much entirely by myself because nobody wants to theory Penguins with me. Yeah, like I really had a lot of fun really just trying to break the deck as much as I possibly could. I tested a fair amount against, meta decks just on Dueling Book. You saw like the video was one of the examples that I did like this past Thursday. I did quite a lot of that. And yeah, even though this deck obviously is still a long ways to go, I don't really know if anyone else has brought this deck to a YCS tier event. So yeah, it's the highest tier of event besides like Worlds or whatever, like WCQs if you want to consider those like higher tier. But I mean, everyone's out to play, right? And these are like competitive players and competitive decks. So the fact that like we were able to take games off of them, matches, like we beat Phantom Knight, we beat Altergeist, for instance, like that, I'm pretty happy with that. I wish I got to play against Sword Soul and Bird Up just to have like a kind of wider coverage of the decks I did play. But I'm not going to complain too much. Really, again, it's kind of like there was a wrap that I had on my Twitter as well, but like there was one really memorable misplay that I made, which was unfortunately against the Invoked Dogmatica player, and I probably could have won that if I just played like not badly. But what can you do? Misplays happen. But apart from that, I think a lot of my losses are just because like the deck itself has a much lower ceiling and recovery. The recovery aspect is still the worst thing about this deck. Like this, Hcabe still needs to give this deck support. It allows you to cover it past turn 1 because if your board gets broken, it's so hard to come back if you don't have DPE ready. And that's just kind of the sad reality of it. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I've rambled on long enough. So thank you all so much for watching. Feel free to support me via social media platforms. You can check those out in the description below. And until next time, I will catch you in the next video. See you guys.